Welcome to the Record Searchlight and Reading.com's live forum with Rob Paoletti, who is now in his fourth year helming the Reading Police Department. I'm reporter Joe Szydlowski, and I'll be moderating this discussion. Thanks, Chief, for sitting down with us.
Sure.
So, real quickly, now here's how you participate. Go to Reading.com for the article and ask your question in the box at the bottom of this article. Or you can tweet at us using the hashtag #SafeReading, all one word. We'll start with a couple questions to get this rolling, and then we'll see what
Sure.
Reading wants to ask you. All right. Chief Paoletti, first off, last week you had your town hall, the first town hall of 2015, and covered two big topics, crime rates and the results of a survey of 180 people your officers encountered. Let's look at crime rates first.
Okay.
Last year, crime overall was up 3%. Why do you think that happened, and what is your department doing to try to reverse that?
Well, there's a lot of factors in there. I mean, we've had, we've talked, ad nauseum over the last 3 years, since 2011 about prison realignment and the changes that's taking place with that. Now you also have compounding on top of that Proposition 47 that's taken a lot of those property crime felonies and resorted them to misdemeanors. So I don't think Proposition 47 had a lot to do with last year's rate. If you look at raw numbers, 3% for us is 40, 50 crimes overall for the year. So relatively it's sort of flat. So we had kind of a shift. Last year burglaries were down and auto theft was up. This year those flip-flopped and auto thefts are down and burglaries are up. So we're sitting really kind of making any progress to the good, and that's where I'm concerned. When you look at calls for service of the Reading Police Department, had a low in 2010 of about 83,000 calls for service, and last year we handled over 94,000 calls for service. So that's an uptick in the amount of workload that the Reading Police Department has had with a stagnant staffing level.
And Chief, could you explain what exactly is a call for service?
A call for service, if somebody calls the police and we have to respond, it's if we do a traffic stop or a checkout or an arrest, all those things equate to what those calls for. So it's total workload of the Reading Police Department that really kind of plays into that call for service number. The big concern that I have with that, not just the workload for the officers, but if you look at our emergency response time over that same time period, it's almost doubled. So now, in order for us to get to an emergency call, which priority 011 calls that come in are traffic accidents, shots fired, people shot, robberies, that kind of thing, it takes us almost 16 minutes. 15:58 is the average response time. That's a long time if you're the person on the other end of the line that really is waiting for a police officer to get there. And then it's even more drastic of an increase when you look at priority 2 and 3 calls where people are just waiting for reports. The customer service level of the department and our ability to get there quickly just isn't there.
So, yes, what are steps are you capable of taking at this point to try to reduce either those calls for service or that response time, especially for those priority 1 calls?
Well, we've taken one step that wasn't very popular, but we responded to about 1,800 calls for service last year that are non-injury traffic accidents that are really kind of civil reports. So the people can just exchange names and their insurance companies take it from there. We would respond and do a 2-page report, which was essentially that name exchange. So we're not responding to those anymore. And in order to keep up with this, we've got 2 things we can do. We can increase the staffing level of the police department to accommodate the calls for service, or we can start picking those civil type crimes and saying we're just not simply responding to those anymore. I would prefer to see the first part of that and increase the staffing level to what the need is for the community. 7 officers per shift out on the street just isn't enough for a city this size.
Okay. What about that plan to get a sales tax on the ballot? It seems like here. How's that going to affect the department, and let's start with how that's going to affect the department.
Well, I mean, it would depend on, first of all, if it passed, and then it would depend on how much. I put together a course of action development plan for council that showed them, what staffing level would look like if there was an additional $2.5 million and an additional $5 million in the budget. And we're going to expand that out even a little bit farther to show people. But our department has become predominantly a reactive department, whereas, you have that reactive and proactive side of law enforcement. The reactive side meaning responding to the 911 calls, and the proactive side is that ability to go out like the neighborhood police unit used to do or a street crimes unit does and actively seek out and try to find the criminal element before, doing drug spotting missions, dealing with, gangsters that are openly selling, street dope, those kinds of things that we just don't have the ability to do right now.
To talk about body cameras,
Uh-huh.
Are those going to happen this year?
Oh, absolutely. What I've been waiting for and what I've been pushing for, there's a lot of inconsistency in the state of California. There is no specific guidelines for this emerging technology with the with respect to the Privacy Act, and who's protected from being filmed and who isn't, and where can we film and where can't we. For the most part, if I'm coming to your house to take a burglary report, I'm walking into your private space. Do you want me filming inside your home? So there's privacy that we have to work out, and protection of domestic victims and videos. There's Public Records Act questions on this. There's chiefs right now. They're having huge, community debates in Los Angeles where they're implementing body cameras, where the chief is saying that it's evidence and we're not releasing them. Where the public outcry is, no, wait a minute, not everything is evidence. There's the Public Records Act that has to be washed out. There's 2 agencies in Washington that have canceled their body camera programs, and Seattle PD has delayed implementation because of the deluge of wanting all their videos so they can put them on YouTube and sell advertising and make money, and they just can't keep up with the volume of Public Records Act requests. Now you have to talk about how much data do you store and for how long. So like the California Highway Patrol stores it for 13 months and a day because you have 1 year to file a state civil lawsuit, but you have 2 years to file a 1983 Civil Rights Act in federal court, and that's where our lawsuits are coming from. So now you just doubled your storage capacity that's required. But there's a government code section that says you have to store all documents for 5 years. Is it a document? Some chiefs say it isn't. I tend to think it might be. I mean, we're going to have to see what the courts say. So we're working through a lot of different issues, and I've pushed the California Police Chiefs Association to put forth some guidelines for chiefs statewide, and those are supposed to be coming out this month. That will allow us to at least get an idea statewide what it should be, and then maybe we can seek some legislation to clean that up so that it's consistent statewide. And then we can finalize the policy. Then we have to meet and confer with the union, and then we have to implement. So it'll take us a little while to still get through that, but I'm trying to make sure that when we do this, we do it the right way, because you're going to have ongoing costs with, you're probably talking, $40,000 to $50,000 a year just to store the data if you use a cloud environment or if you buy a server, and then you're talking about who's going to manage all that data. We filed 4,300 new cases with the DA's office last year. That's potentially 4,300 DVDs that have to be burned so that you have discovery of evidence to the defense and everything else. So it's a manpower management and a data storage issue once you finalize and you buy the cameras. Buying the cameras is the cheap part.
Any idea how much that would cost annually? Like, let's say if we took CHP's idea of, what is it, 13 months in one day?
13 months in a day, you're probably talking about $30,000 a year for cloud storage for the amount of volume of data that you're getting. Every chief that I've talked to that has a body camera program that's a department our size has at least one full-time person working to manage that data, to do the public records releases. Because you got to remember, if somebody gives a public records, we have to actually go through and make sure there's no domestic violence victims, no juveniles, no juvenile suspects. So it has to be viewed before it's released to make sure it meets the parameters of the Public Records Act. And quite frankly, with the video, it's kind of up in the air right now because as to what is actually a releasable and what's evidence. So that's what I'm trying to get figured out before we actually implement the program. Buying the cameras, the costs have come down. The advantage of moving slowly, the costs have come down significantally. I keep hearing about, hey, Chief, this one's only $200. It's right, the camera's $200, but they don't give you the software data. So you're talking about just under $1,000 a camera with the software to be able to manage the data from the download.
So let's talk about your other presentation at the town hall. During it, you mentioned that you've heard that the Rescue Mission and Hope van are cited by the individuals who were contacted by your police department as being kind of drawing them to Redding. But there are plenty of other services in California cities, aren't there, such as in nearby Chico, that offer these services. Why Redding?
Well, Chico's got a similar problem, and the idea for that map of where they come from actually came from the Chico Police Department because they have a similar map. But I've never seen of what this population was. This is a that constantly comes in contact with the police. The officers did this survey while they were doing enforcement. So never was this intended to draw a picture of the total homeless population. I was very clear about that Thursday night. This is that transient population that comes into contact with the police. And of that population, those that came from out of town, what brought them here? And the charities weren't the only things that were talked about. It's the only thing that we've written about, but it's not all I talked about. That was about 1/3 of that population, or 37%. I also talked about those that are stranded here and those that come here for family and friends. So I don't want to make it all about the charities, and I didn't try to on Thursday night. It was 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. But what I did say relative to that is that the transient population that's coming here that says they're coming here for services, a vast majority of those coming here for the services of the Good News Rescue Mission. There was a much smaller portion that said the Hope Van. I should have clarified that on Thursday night. Instead, I just answered the question of what the top two were. And so, I want to make that very clear. But when we talk to them, when my officer stops a carload of 5 guys, and because he thought the car was stolen, and the guys in the car say, "Hey, don't worry about us. We're just here for a week to get some medical care at the Hope Van, then we're going back to Long Beach." There's a problem there. Officer Meadows just talked to a lady 2 weeks ago, because I made the bus ticket program, that if they're stranded here and they want to go home, we won't involve them in the bus ticket program unless there's somebody they can talk to at the other end, because they have to have this support channel. Well, what's their support channel here? So Gary Meadows just talked to a lady less than 2 weeks ago. Reno PD bought her a bus ticket here. So if we're going to concentrate on fixing our homeless problems, and we're going to make donations to charities to try to help our local homeless, then let's concentrate our resources on those that are local and find ways to identify who they are and not be an attractant to the community.
Any idea why Reno PD Police Department bought her bus ticket here?
I don't know. About a month ago, they got bus tickets to here from Florida. So there's other communities that are willing to ship them to us. And we're trying to be, and the idea for the bus ticket program that we have now came out of San Francisco PD. That's what their Operation Homeward Bound does. But maybe based on what we're finding here, maybe we need to modify that a little bit. Is it compassionate to somebody who's stranded in Redding to make them stay here just because they want to go home to wherever, Missouri, but because they have no family there, we won't facilitate them getting home? I don't know. That's what I said Thursday night, was that's for this community's voice to decide. I don't have the authority to dictate to charities what they're going to do. I'm just what the transients reported to us. And this was self-reported data from that transient population that comes into contact with the police.
Any idea how many of them are from Redding versus how many of these transients are from out of the area and coming into the Redding?
We do have, we have our local homeless and our local that have been here for a long period of time. But when you talk about the local homeless that come from out of the area, it flexes, because they are transient and they do move. And we do get a big influx of those that live as if they're transient during the marijuana grow season, and we see them. And those are typically those, that are here for the commercial grows. The for-profit grows, not necessarily those that are here to legitimately, grow what some refer to as medicine. They're called trimmers, and you'll see them.
Any idea how many come here for that purpose?
No, we didn't do the count during that time frame, and we have 188 that are in the survey. 61 wouldn't answer our questions, so. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably part of that 61. But of the other 127 that actually would answer the question and talk to us. The day after the town hall meeting, Channel 12 News, and they had it on night, they went out with Officer Mike Thomas into Linden Canyon. First 2 people they talked to were from Oregon that said, word on the street, Redding is a good place to be if you're homeless. So that is that idea that I want this community to think about and really look at. Are we using our homeless resources in the best way? Is there changes we could make to how we're delivering services so that we focus on our local homeless population and we're not being an attractant from those from out of town?
So you also talked about homeless camps, the encampments around town. I've seen some people, especially on social media, say that this was just another excuse to just attack or bash the homeless. I was wondering, how do you respond to them?
That's absolutely not the case. I go out. I've done uncountable, public speaking engagements as police chief in 3 years. And I will tell you that the top two issues that I hear about as I go out through the community are transients and property crime. And some of that is interrelated. Unfortunately, we have a computer system that was put in 1984 and hasn't been upgraded since then, and we're in the process of going out to RFP to do that now. So I don't know unless I have somebody manually count, 7,200 arrests to see, what percentage is that transient population. And I've said before that, not all homeless commit crime and not all criminals are homeless. So, we have our local criminals too that are pretty prolific, that we arrest on a regular basis for property crimes. So what we really have to look at and try to decide is how is this homeless population affecting our community? And when you go out into these transient camps, Bob Brannon last year removed 148,000 pounds of trash from transient camps and public open space. One of our greatest resources that we have here is our natural resources and the attraction of tourists to our area because of those natural resources. On Sunday alone, 17,000 pounds of garbage were removed from Linden Canyon, and we have Bob Brannon estimates another 7,000 or 8,000 pounds of trash still to be hauled out that's staged at the bottom of the hill. That is a ton of trash doing environmental damage to our community, and these transient camps below are hospitals right below a subdivision. And those residents pushed for this cleanup because they've heard gunshots, they've heard yelling and screaming, there's drug dealers going in and out of there. Go talk to the people that live in Indian Hill subdivision, and why were there 20 and 25 of them out there that day? Because they want to see that canyon cleaned up. And our cleanup efforts of these transient camps are in response to the voice of our community.
So in light of individuals who are coming here for charitable services, you talked about how, as the police chief, you can't force these services to change how they operate.
No.
But in your mind, what is the appropriate help these agencies level of help these agencies should provide?
Well, obviously, if you look at what are you trying to serve, I mean, we have enough, local people that are down and out that need our help. And, we've talked over the last 3 years about how that population is divided into these will take help, won't take help, and unfortunately are mentally ill and don't know they need help, the wills, won'ts, and can'ts. And what we're focused on and what we focused on in this survey is that won't population. So that won't population that just wants to live a lifestyle of drugs and alcohol, that is making it to where our good citizens don't feel safe going to parks. Look at South City Park. Go out there at lunch and see if you'd feel safe sitting there and eating lunch. So if what's attracting them there is a lunch program put on by a church and they serve lunch in that park every day, then maybe we need to rethink where we're serving that lunch. Why don't you serve it in your church? Why do you go to the park to do it? If people want to help, then, help them in a way that's beneficial to the community and serves our local homeless and doesn't bring more people here, because right now in that population, Reading is known as a good place to be. And we need to change that, in my opinion.
I'm wondering, one more question before we get to the audience questions. What do you see as being the big challenges for RPD over the next year or so, and how do you plan to address them?
Well, we're in the process of doing this strategic plan, and I've heard complaints about, we say it's going to take 9 months. Well, the overall plan countywide with the Reading Police Department, social services, space, and all that may take 9 months. There's certain aspects of this I think that we can get out faster for the Reading. And one of those is the staffing model of what this should look like. I want this community to know what a police department should look like for a city that really is 60 square miles and has a daytime population, according to traffic studies, pushing well over 100,000 people. Our staffing level is just too low, and we need to find a way to make that grow. And it's going to have to grow incrementally, because even if I use this hypothetical at the town hall meeting the other day, if the city manager came and said, hey, we just won the Powerball in the city and you have $100 million a year, go hire a bunch of cops. It still takes a long time to screen them, hire them, train them, and get them on the street. So let's find a way based on here's where we should be, here's where we are now, incremental 10-year plan to get us to where we need to be so that we can start to take steps, bigger steps now, slower steps later, to keep this department growing and to keep it to the size to serve the community that it should. That's going to be the biggest challenge, though, because that's about economics and money, and police departments aren't cheap.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Let's
Sure.
see what NorCal wants to ask you. We've had a couple questions submitted in advance. Here's one on personal protection, Chief. When you're not at work and at home or out on the town with your family, how do you protect yourself?
Well, as an officer, I always, we're required, and I require the officers as part of our policy for them to carry their off-duty weapons with them all the time, because police officers are on duty 24 hours a day, and if they have to intervene to save somebody's life and it's something that requires their firearm, then I want them to have it with them. But really, I've talked. We've done presentations at town hall meetings. The 9th town hall meeting we've done. So, we've tried to follow this format of crime stats, information, crime stats, information. We did Mike Leonard did a very good presentation on crime prevention through environmental design and how to harden the target of your home. And the first year that I did the town hall meeting, over 50% of our burglaries in the city had no forced entry, which means we're leaving our windows, doors, and garage doors open for them to steal from us. This year, only 32% had no forced entry. Did it bring our burglary rate down? Unfortunately not, but it at least made it harder for them to get in. So it shows that we're starting to pay some attention. I'm still a big advocate for dogs. I'm a dog lover, and dogs hear what you don't, they smell what you don't, and they make noise, and criminals don't like that noise. So, I jokingly say that, I have an 80-pound Doberman with 360-degree access to my house, so come give it a shot, and you'll meet Apollo. But anything that you can do to harden that target. Almost 50% of our general theft in the city last year was still from a motor vehicle. So we're still leaving stuff in our cars, making it, giving them the opportunity to steal it. I don't, and I do read the blogs. So, I'm not blaming citizens for leaving things in their cars. That's not my intent. I'm just trying to educate you on how not to be a victim and tell you where they're stealing from. And they're stealing predominantly right now. Most of our burglaries that had no forced entry were still garages. So we're leaving our garage doors open still. And then the motor vehicles, leaving valuables in your motor vehicle is just inviting somebody to steal from you, and we have to stop that behavior.
Any tips on trying to remind yourself not to leave your keys in your car?
Well, I have the locking thing, so I always make sure my car honks so I know it's locked. The one time my wife didn't, they stole my daughter's purse out of the car because they don't listen to me either. So,
we got a couple questions again about the
Sure.
about the survey. Your presentation on the scope of the homeless problem is a big topic, Chief. Here's one question. How were questions in regard to the person's origins phrased, and how far back in the person's history did the officers reach before determining they were non-local?
Well, the question is where are you from? And, that's the end of the question for most of the social services. And a lot of them will say, I'm from here. Well, how long have you been here? And where did you come from originally? So we didn't really ask them how long they'd been in Reading, but we did ask them, what specifically brought you here? Not, hey, I came here for a job and I lost my job. It's, I came here for this, or I got stranded. There's not a lot of them that say, they came here 10 years ago. That's not something we included in the survey. It's specifically, I came here for this reason. You'd be surprised the number that actually came here for family and friends, but have now been turned out for those family and friends because of their own behavior problems. So, the original homeless outreach survey that we did actually asked them, were you here less than 6 months, 6 months to a year? And we have that data, and we've shared that with the record Searchlight. This one was, where did you come from originally, and what specifically brought you here? And that specific answer is what we listed on that survey.
Here's another question. What services did the 37% who originally said they came to Reading for charitable services, what services were they expecting to get in Reading? Obviously, you talked about the Good News Rescue Mission, the Hope Van. What other services did they say?
Most of the people that say they came here from services, and they didn't correlate the two, but anecdotally from the officers that did the survey, most of the ones that say they came here for charitable services are that huge population that came from other areas of California. But if you're from Siskiyou, or you're from Lansing County, or Modoc County, or Trinity, this is the only mission that's really in the North State, other than the one that's in Chico. And I don't think theirs is as big as ours. And that's the only one that I know of from the two that we know of from North. So, that's a large part of our state population. Reading is going to be challenged for the fact that this is the largest city north of Sacramento. And if you look at the counties that surround us, there's not a whole lot of services in Modoc and Lassen and in Trinity County. The lady that I talked about that got the bus ticket, her bus ticket, and let me correct that, her bus ticket actually went from Reno to Wairika and then Wairika to Redding. So, we are the only population base north of Sacramento, other than Chico, that has a lot of those services. So I think most of the people that you talk to that are coming for charitable services, it's that Southern Oregon and Northern California population. You're stranded and you're coming for family and friends. That's usually what you see a little bit farther out.
You answered the second part of this question, so I'll ask you a little bit of a different one. When you showed that map of the encampment, like a lot of them were on waterways.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
People need to drink. I mean, if you're homeless in downtown San Francisco, where are you going to get water if you have no money to go buy it?
I mean, couldn't they go into a public bathroom and use a faucet?
Maybe. I mean, but, if you talk about, where they're concentrated around those roadways or those waterways. And, that gives them, we also have the riparian areas they call it a is the outgrowth on the sides of the river that protects the river from intoxicants and other things getting into the. I learned this the other day because of this transient topic. So you have thick brush that's around the river. You have places to hide. That's where our open space is. Other than Linden Canyon, most of our open space that they want to go camp in is down by the waterways and the rivers because there's not houses butting directly up against it.
Okay. All right. So, I think we're getting ready to take a break here for a minute, but we'll be back in a few minutes. Again, continuing to chat with the chief. Don't forget, if you have any questions, you can send them. You can submit them through the article itself at Redding.com or via Twitter with the hashtag #SafeRedding. Right. Welcome back to the Record Searchlight and Redding.com's live forum with Chief Paoletti. Again, thanks, Chief. I think we have one more question on the on the scope of the homeless problem in your presentation. I think they're just wanting clarification. Are you saying that none of the transients stopped by the Redding police are from the Redding area?
I didn't say that. The ones that were included in the survey were the ones that came from out of town. And those are the ones that we included in that survey so that we could see what the attractant value was. So, yes, there are some that are local, but most of our local homeless population is involved in services to solve that condition. So really what this is not even the homeless population. Transient population that you see that are getting cited for drinking in the parks, urinating in public, all those things that we're citing them for, the drug violations and other things, illegal camping. That's the population that was involved in the study. It did not and is not intended to be inclusive of the entire homeless population. It is the transient population coming in contact with the police. I was very clear about that on Thursday night.
So I'd like to ask about this question about the city of Oakland. And they have a program called the Downtown Ambassadors, where they walk the streets in brightly colored uniforms and they help the public clean graffiti, ask the homeless to move along, and provide a downtown presence. And this person is asking, I'm sure we could find volunteers or to be ambassadors or to use funds from associations to fund this. Has this program been considered? Well, have you heard of this?
I haven't heard of that one, and I'll look into that. We have been looking at a volunteer program since really kind of the campaign. It was one of the campaign topics, and former council member Jones and I did a presentation on some suggestions that him and I had. There is some issues that I have to get through union-wise before I a volunteer program in the format that we designed. That it's a good idea, but just like the Citizen Patrol is kind of really where I want to. They're taking on tasks that free up the officers to go out and be able to respond to the things that actually need the officers to respond to. But we got to get through a couple more negotiations to get that done.
Could you give us an idea of what that program might look like, that once it's finalized after those negotiations are done?
Well, there's a whole lot of things that the officers do right now that, quite frankly, don't necessarily take police academy training and don't necessarily take, an officer fully outfitted to go do. Booking found property, doing traffic control at traffic accidents, responding to traffic accidents and helping you facilitate change that we're not responding to now. We take online reports. Some people don't have the internet or can't negotiate that. Well, if we're already having a citizen fill out a report, why couldn't a volunteer go take that report? So a lot of those duties are things that our community service officers used to do. But we've gone from 16 community service officers to 4, just like we've gone from 121 staff to 98. So in total, the Reading Police Department didn't just lose the sworn officers, it also lost 12 CSOs. So we're over 30 personnel that we've lost. Well, if we can supplement some of that with volunteers, I think that would be good to bolster the customer service we can give to our community. The other idea that I put in the course of action plan was hiring college students. We have 12 right now that are cadets. They make about $10 an hour part-time. It's a college job. Why couldn't we expand that program to where they can go out and do some of those duties? And the reason I really like the cadet side of it as opposed to the volunteer is because I can count on them. Volunteers sometimes, if they can't make it that day, well, now you're short-staffed and you can't plan for that. Where the other is an employee, and you got to show up to work. And it's a good college job for some of our local kids going to Shasta College or Simpson. And maybe we can get those local kids then want to go into law enforcement and become the future of the Reading Police Department. So both of the programs, I think, though, have a lot of merit. We just got to get through a couple of side issues before we can get to that.
Okay. Next up, we have a Proposition 47. Chief, before I was wondering first, could you tell us what Proposition 47 is?
Okay.
And then the question is, with Prop 47 being passed, a lot of crime will not be felony anymore. So what would a larger police force be able to do to stop these non-felony crimes?
Okay. Well, here, Proposition 47 was placed on the ballot in November. And basically what it did was took a lot of our felony property crimes and reduced them to misdemeanors. It also basically reduced the possession, not possession for sale, but possession of all drugs to a misdemeanor. So now, in order for a commercial burglary to be a felony, it has to have a theft of over $950. A gun used to be an automatic felony for theft of a gun. Now it's a gun over the value of $950. So it's complicated things in a lot of ways, especially on the drug side. And I think that that's then going to equate to the property crime side, because the drugs lead to the addiction, which leads to the property crime. And the problem is that some of our most addictive substances are now misdemeanors. So instead of going to jail when they're arrested for those on a felony and having the judge have sentencing authority to put them into a rehabilitation program, we have removed our judge's authority to mandatorily sentence people to certain drug treatment programs. And a lot of people have walked away from their drug treatment programs because Proposition 47 is retroactive for your whole life. So if your commitment offense applied under Prop 47 and you were in state prison, now you just got out with a petition to the court. So I think Proposition 47, we're going to have to wait to see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it doesn't have the negative effect that I think it's going to. But I think our property crime is going to see a significant increase. There's a rule in law enforcement called the stale misdemeanor rule. In order for officers to arrest for a misdemeanor other than, any misdemeanor, it has to be committed in their presence. So if they came into your office and sold your $750 iPad and walked out and you had them on video, and I caught them an hour later and they didn't have the iPad anymore, but I have solid proof of that felony, I can arrest them. Now I can't. It's a stale misdemeanor. We have to submit the report to the district attorney for a complaint. So there's a lot of changes that took place that I don't think the voting public really understood the full effect of that. And I don't really care for the way that Proposition 47 was put onto the ballot. It's a Safer Schools Act, because it diverted a little bit of money from criminal justice to the schools. It just was billed very inappropriately, and I think it's going to have a negative effect. Heroin is coming into this community very big with the cutbacks on the opiate painkillers. And heroin addicts are much more prolific thieves than methamphetamine addicts that we're used to dealing with. A methamphetamine addict needs methamphetamine about every 10 to 12 hours. A heroin addict needs heroin every 4 to 6 hours. And they get much sicker when they don't have it. So they're much more desperate to steal. And that's, I think, going to be a huge issue. And now it's all just misdemeanors. So you also don't have the ability to incarcerate them and let them dry out and get that stuff out of their system the way that we used to. Now they just keep going up and up, and it's creating a lot of problems. And the officers are getting into very violent fights with these subjects, especially on the methamphetamine.
Okay. One final question. It asks, how has the medical marijuana growing ordinance been working in Reading? Any problems? They may be referring to Measure A, but that only affects the county. Correct?
Measure A affects the county. The only complaints that we really get in the city, and I think it's probably what they were trying to affect with Measure A by moving it to an indoor grow with a charcoal particulate filter and all that stuff. The only real complaints that we get significantly are smell. If you're of offense of a mature sativa plant, they do have a very pungent, odor, and most of the complaints we get are about odor, and that's. So when we get them, we forward it to CENTIF or code enforcement. Code enforcement goes and inspects it, makes sure that they're growing legally and they're fulfilling all the parameters. There's parts of the Reading ordinance though that I think are confusing, and I think they're confusing on the part of the grower and the code enforcement and the police, because it talks about how much square footage that you can have, but it's square footage of what level on the canopy, because obviously the plants go up, and I think it might be easier for everybody involved if they just went to a straight plant count rather than a canopy size and square footage. But that's a minor detail. But we have heard a lot of grumblings about since Measure A passed, all the growers are going to come into the city limits now, because we do have 4 or 5 acre lots within the city limits, and we'll have to wait to see what happens during the grow season to see if that complaint factor shifts.
Right. Thank you very much, Chief, for sitting
Absolutely.
down with us. I appreciate it. And you can visit Reading.com later this evening for a recap of this, as well as recorded video. And a recap will also be in tomorrow's paper. Chief.
Sure.